Thank you for tuning in, everybody. This is Line Up with Fit PD. I'm Juan Cephas from Fit PD, and I'm going to be sharing some stories about the people that I've met in law enforcement that are just some amazing people. I was a sergeant for with San Diego Police Department for almost 30 years. I've been teaching cops for over 23 years. And in those journeys, I've met a lot of amazing people. The truth of it is that we need more training for cops. And today, we're going to be talking to Greg Amundson, who is, I don't even know where to begin. And it's actually Dr. Greg Amundson. You know, he's got a background as a law enforcement officer for a county, for a Harvard Police Department, DEA. He also is a founding athlete for CrossFit. He's written books, Fire Breathing for Fitness. He also is an ordained minister. Part of his research as in his doctorate was in resilience for law enforcement. And the list just goes on and on. I don't even know how old Greg is because of all of his accomplishments. He was also a captain in the United States Army, and he's provided combat tactics training for officer candidates and beyond. He's also headed the CrossFit for law enforcement class for a long time. And I'm just so happy that you could be here, Greg. Thank you for being here, Greg.
Thank you for the kind introduction, my friend. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Greg. So, let's start out. I mean, I've heard you tell me so many different stories throughout the years that I've known you. And one of the ones that resonates with me the most is when you told me about how, you told a group of us, because I was in one of your classes, about how you came into contact with CrossFit, and Coach Glassman put you through a workout that you described that only you can describe. Can you tell us can you tell everybody a little bit about that?
Sure. It seemed like it was yesterday. So the context for me finding CrossFit, it ties directly into law enforcement. I was a rookie deputy sheriff at the Santa Cruz County Sheriff's Office in Santa Cruz, California, fresh out of the police academy, South Bay Regional Law Enforcement Training Center in San Jose, California, where at the time, with the exception of one of my teachers at the academy, known as Pappy, Steve Pappenfuse, he goes by Pappy, still a good friend of mine. With the exception of Pappy, the other academy instructors had everyone in my academy convinced that if Monday, Wednesday, and Friday we did long, slow distance running in formation at the pace of the slowest candidate in the class, then on Tuesday and Thursday we stood in front of a mirror and did bicep curls and deltoid raises, that would be enough training to prepare us for the street. So I bought into that, and that's exactly the training that I did. Well, shortly after finishing the field training program with the sheriff's office, I got into my first real honest to goodness fight for my life on the street, and I almost died. It was actually my former FTO who came to my rescue that pulled the person that was beating me up off of me. What I remember most about that incident is it was the lack of metabolic capacity that I had. I simply ran out of energy. I ran out of gas. There was no gas left in the tank. And even though my mind was trying to tell my body to perform certain tasks, my body, because of the level of exhaustion, was simply not able to do the most basic compound gross motor skills. I was just completely exhausted. And I had never in my entire life experienced that level of exhaustion before. It was a completely foreign sensation to me. So shortly after that incident, on my own, I was trying to recreate through a workout that same type of feeling I had on the street.
Okay.
And in trying to create that feeling, I spoke with one of my friends named Sam Radetsky, and Sam was a longtime martial artist. He'd been a good friend of mine all through college. And I told Sam what I was trying to do. And Sam was really tied into the martial arts community in Santa Cruz, especially Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So Sam says, Greg, there's this rumor circulating around Santa Cruz that there's this crazy gym, there's these crazy workouts, there's this crazy coach. And the thing about these workouts is they are so hard that they can kill you. And so I thought, that's exactly what I'm looking for. Where do I go? How do I sign up? And you'll love this. The phone number was in the phone book.
Phone book.
The phone book, the yellow pages, brother. So I opened the phone book. I looked for CrossFit spelt with two different words. It was cross space fit.
All right.
And the phone number, I know it to this day, 464-2520. So I call that phone number and it rings into the gym. At least I think it's a gym. I find out the next day what it really is. I think it's a gym. And Greg Glassman answers the phone. And I said, hey, I'm Greg Amundson. I'm a local deputy sheriff. I heard about your gym. Can I come try a workout? He said, yeah, no problem. Be here tomorrow morning at 6 a.m.
No problem.
Rolls around and I drive down Research Park Drive. And the first thought that comes to my mind as I ride down Research Park Drive is that's in my patrol beat. Okay. So I patrol Research Park Drive all the time. And as I'm driving down Research Park, I think to myself, this can't be right. There's no gym on Research Park Drive that I'm aware of. And I find the address, and it's more of a storage locker than a gymnasium. So I knock on the door, and Glassman opens the door. At 6 a.m., Glassman opens the door, and there's two people inside the gym. It's Glassman, and there's a guy named Mike Weaver, who I will work out with. And Mike Weaver goes on to become one of the highest level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competitors in the world.
Wow. All right.
Phenomenal athlete, just a very talented athlete and very talented martial artist as well. So here now we get to the heart of your question. I'm thinking these workouts are going to kill somebody, and there's only two people here that are going to do this workout.
What are the chances?
Right? And I don't want to lose. I don't want to die. So although it's a small gym, there's actually two levels. And on the upstairs level, it's a small landing, and there's two Concept 2 rowers. And I'd never seen a Concept 2 rower before. So we walk up the stairs, I sit down, and Glassman now briefs the workout, which, as you know, becomes very famous in the CrossFit culture. And Glassman says, okay, you're going to work out against Mike Weaver.
All right.
And that kind of plants the seed. Like, what does that mean to work out against somebody? So he says the workout is one round as fast as you can. You're going to row 1,000 meters on this rower.
All right.
Then, kid, I want you to use the handrail as you walk down the stairs. And I take that as an insult. I'm like, use the handrail. Do you know who I am? I'm a deputy sheriff. I'm a cop. Come on. So he says, use the handrail as you walk down the stairs. Then on the bottom level, you're going to see a kettlebell. And you're going to swing the kettlebell 21 times, and then you're going to do 12 pull-ups. And you'll do that all as fast as you can. Without really any further explanation, he says, 3, 2, 1, go. And as you know, that also becomes part of the CrossFit culture. And I just start tearing into this Concept 2 rower, and I've got no clue about technique or range of motion. And within 100 meters, I mean, the workout is 10 seconds underway, and I start feeling like I'm going to die. And as I go through this workout, I literally feel like I'm fighting for my life. And I'm still on the rower as Mike just sprints down the stairs. I've got both hands on the handrail. Wow. Because if I didn't have both hands, I would have fallen down the stairs. And I go down the stairs, and Mike's about halfway through the kettlebell swings, and he's got a 53-pound kettlebell, and Glassman has a 35-pound kettlebell for me.
Okay.
I kind of take that as an insult also, but at the same time, I'm thankful because there's no way I could have done 53 pounds. So I'm kind of watching Mike to figure out the technique. I do my kettlebell swings. And as I'm doing my kettlebell swings, Mike's doing kipping pull-ups.
Oh,
I'd never seen that before. All my association with pull-ups from the academy, if we ever did pull-ups, they had to be strict.
strict.
So when I get to the pull-up bar, I'm trying to do the best I can. I'm doing some combination of strict, but I'm also trying to do the technique that Mike did. So at the end of the workout, I crumble up in a heap in the corner of the gym. I feel like I'm going to either die or pass out or throw up. But I also realized in that moment, this is exactly what I've been looking for. It really was the holy grail of fitness. And I never looked back. And that day, I was working a swing shift back at the sheriff's office. So even though I've got 6 months on the job, now I'm the authority on fitness. So I go back into roll call, and there's all these senior deputies, and I'm like, all right, guys, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do some kettlebell swings and pull-ups, and we're gonna get a rowing machine here in the gym. And the other deputies are thinking, you are out of your mind. We're not gonna do anything like that at all. But that's where the journey started. It was that first workout, and it was the warm reception that I had from Glassman and from Mike and from some of the other early founding athletes. I really never look back. And even to this day, I'm not currently part of a CrossFit gym, but I still definitely subscribe to the methodology that I learned all those years ago.
Well, that story still makes me laugh today. I mean, when I heard that story, it's just such a great story. But it influenced how you started to work out. And so you're telling me that you no longer do the bicep tricep workouts?
Bicep, tricep, calf raise, reverse tricep kickback. Nope, those are all a part of my past now. I left those at the police academy.
Those, they're gone. They're gone. Now, at some point, you end up owning your own CrossFit gym. Is that correct?
I do. It was really an incredible opportunity. Uh, my time frame might kind of be skewed, but if I recall, it was sometime around 2007 or 8. Greg Glassman had an opportunity to relocate to Prescott, Arizona,
Okay.
but we really wanted to keep the original CrossFit gym open.
Oh,
And so Glassman entrusted me with stewardship of the gym. And this was also the time that we did, I think it was called Operation Phoenix. And it was when we started to do CrossFit nonprofit opportunities. And there
okay.
was a CrossFit gym at Camp Pendleton. And so some of the gear that we had at the original CrossFit gym was gifted to Operation Phoenix at Camp Pendleton to help them get their gym off the ground. And some of the other equipment was retained inside the original CrossFit gym. So for approximately 1 year, I maintained ownership of the original gym in Santa Cruz, but this was also the time that I was transitioning from the sheriff's office to DEA. And I was ultimately reassigned along the southwest border. So when I left Santa Cruz, we transferred ownership of the gym to, I think his name, forgive me, I think it's Hollis. I don't recall his last name, but it was Hollis. I think his sister's name was Danielle. We transferred ownership to them, and they, I think, still own the gym to this day. Although, if I recall, it was renamed. When I owned it, it was still called CrossFit Headquarters, but I think when
Okay.
Hollis took it over, I think they renamed it CrossFit Santa Cruz, but I might be wrong on some of that history.
All right. All right. Well, that's very interesting history. But now you're in the DEA. And how's fitness at the DEA at the time that you joined them?
It was phenomenal. The academy experience I had at DEA, it's what I was looking for. I really had this idea in my mind of wanting to be part of the best of the best. And I wanted to be the archetype of the warrior. The warrior archetype has always been very close to me. As you know, I share that warrior archetype in a lot of the courses that I teach. And I was looking for the warrior tribe for the Knights of the Round Table. And I found it in DEA. The academy experience in Quantico, Virginia was world class. The training at every level was phenomenal. It complemented what I was doing in CrossFit.
Give the viewers a little example of what we're talking about here. So, like in fitness at the DEA, what kind of workouts did you do?
They look like the methodology of CrossFit. So obviously, in the federal government, very often, and for good reason, the brand name of certain products or methodologies may not be used, but the adherence to particular protocols are abided by. So the protocol or the methodology of CrossFit is constantly varied, high intensity functional movement. And that's what the Academy protocol was. And the training facility was designed for that type of methodology to be utilized. And
Okay.
that's a big contrast from what I experienced when I was in San Jose at the police academy. That gym was designed for bodybuilding,
Okay.
for the bodybuilding type movements, for utilizing machines. When you walked in, there were mirrors everywhere and there were machines everywhere. And those machines were designed to really focus on isolating a particular muscle group one at a time. But when I went to DEA, it looked like a CrossFit gym. It was a big open gym. There were bumper plates, there were pull-up bars on the walls, ropes hanging from the ceiling, medicine balls. I mean, it was amazing.
Sounds like heaven.
Oh yeah.
So now, what is the how about the DTAC program? How was that?
The DPAC program, it was a combination of Krav Maga and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And
Is
I recognized the Krav Maga right away. I started training Krav Maga in 2001. So I was already a practitioner and instructor in Krav Maga at the time I went to DEA. So I recognized immediately the stand up component of the defensive tactics and the ground component. I recognized right away. CrossFit had a brotherhood or sisterhood, if you will, with Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. As a matter of fact, the year before Glassman opened his gym on Research Park, he had a small mat space in Claudio Franca Brazilian Jiu Jitsu in
oh,
Santa Cruz. So from the inception of CrossFit in Santa Cruz, CrossFit and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, they were intermingled. So when I went to the academy with DEA, I recognized right away, wow, we're doing Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, we're doing Krav Maga, and we're doing CrossFit. This is awesome.
now I know you have a black belt in Krav Maga, and you have at least a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, right?
I do. I have a purple belt in Jiu Jitsu.
So, how important is it? I mean, because not everybody's going to go and get to your level, but how important is it for cops to go out and train on their own so for survival on the street?
Well, brother, it's as I always say, you have to train as if your life depends on it because it does. So, unless the agency, and many agencies do, provide a combination of fitness and defensive tactics programming for their officers and for their deputies and for their agents. And that is wonderful. That's one of the best gifts that the agency can provide. In my travels, I've found numerous agencies that actually pay their officers or agents to work out on duty. And that creates a culture within the agency where fitness, where defensive tactics, where training is embraced. It's part of the actual fabric or part of the culture.
Yeah.
And that just creates a much more attractive opportunity for the officers within the agency. If it's provided by the agency, if the resources are provided, if the financial incentive is provided, if the time on duty is provided, it's far more likely that the officers whose lives are dependent upon the training will participate in those programs. But unfortunately, not all agencies in our nation are able to, for various reasons, provide that. So in those instances, it's imperative that the individual officer take it upon themselves to seek out that training somewhere in their community. And thankfully, the CrossFit culture and the martial arts culture is very supportive of law enforcement. I know most CrossFit gyms offer significant discounts. The martial arts gym I participate in now in Georgia, they offer law enforcement discounts. So usually the studios are equally aware of the importance of that training for those people who put their lives on the line. So they're able to offer discounts to make that training more available for them. So to succinctly answer your question, if you are in a profession where you are raising your hand to take an oath that you will protect and defend the community that you serve, then you have to train like your life depends on it. Simple as that.
That's, yeah, oversimplified, but yet so complex because
Right.
there's so many of us that don't train. So many cops don't train. And maybe, in part is because their department doesn't have the culture that you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
And changing culture is something that everyone in law enforcement has to take a vested interest in. Everyone from the officer on day one in the academy all the way up to the chief of police or the sheriff or the special agent in charge. Everyone in law enforcement, we collectively have to create a change in our culture. And I think one of the ways to do that is a mental model. I like using that term. It's fairly academic. You could also use the term paradigm, but ideas are what change culture.
Mm.
And the idea that a law enforcement officer is a professional athlete, that idea can change culture. That can change an entire agency. That can change communities. That can change our nation. If officers started to view themselves as professional athletes, that idea or that paradigm or that mental model, that changes everything. If we hold that idea in our mind, everything begins to change from the ground up within the agency.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, that's like a foundational uh, work that needs to be done. Without that foundation, we can't move forward.
Right,
Now,
right. And oftentimes what happens, and you and I have had this conversation, I've shared this in presentations that you and I have been part of. What happens at first when we propose the professional athlete paradigm is officers might be reluctant to embrace that idea. And even members of the public are reluctant because we immediately associate professional athlete with somebody like a professional boxer or a UFC fighter. But it doesn't take many steps in this progression to realize that there's actually more metabolic demand placed upon the officer than the UFC fighter. Because the UFC fighter, they know the day and time of their next fight. They know who their opponent will be. They know the conditions under which the fight will take place. They know the time domain. They know the rest between rounds. There are rules. There's a referee. There's particular protective gear. There is a whole culture, if you will, that surrounds and governs that type of fighting experience. Whereas the officer, they don't know when the next day or time of their fight is. They don't know who their opponent will be. There are foreign weapons introduced to that. Rules, that opens up a lot of different questions because the officers need to abide by constitutional law, by use of force policy, maybe by a continuum within their agency, whereas the suspects certainly are not abiding by any rules. There's no referee, there's no cage or ring to contain the fight. The very environment the fight takes place in is inherently dangerous. So very quickly you realize, whoa, even though we hold the UFC fighter in the highest esteem, and they are held in
sure.
high esteem, and they should be because they are professional athletes. But guess what? So are cops.
That's
So are
right.
cops.
That's right.
Right. So if we start to understand that, then really, like I said, everything begins to change. The way that we train, the way we think, the way we eat, everything begins to change when we embrace that idea.
We need to embrace it. We need to embrace it. Now, at some point, you involved with the CrossFit for Law Enforcement course that you were teaching around the country.
I did. Yeah, I advocated with Glassman, and he was a big supporter of this to his great credit. I let Glassman know that what we should really consider doing is having a nonprofit component. And that nonprofit component could start in law enforcement. And that's what led to the CrossFit Law Enforcement Affiliation Program. It's a program where CrossFit gym can be brought into an agency at absolutely no cost to the agency. The only condition, as you know, because you hosted us, the only condition is that the agency cannot offer any training to non-members of the agency. That way, that gym isn't competing with CrossFit gyms where that's their livelihood. So that's really the only stipulation. Even the CrossFit level one for the affiliate owner in the nonprofit CrossFit law enforcement gym, even the fees for that are waived. And then I also designed the CrossFit law enforcement application course, which was a 1 day course designed to take the 2 day program, scale it down to 1 day, and explain how CrossFit can be applied in that unique demographic or in that unique context. It was applying CrossFit for the law enforcement professional. And I took that course not just around the nation, I took that around the world. It was an
Oh,
incredible opportunity. I taught thousands of law enforcement officers the principles of CrossFit and helped hundreds of agencies implement the nonprofit CrossFit gym.
well, that's great work. Tell us a little bit about what you saw at different agencies, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Well, thankfully there was no ugly, really. I mean, what I saw was agencies that were just so thankful for the opportunity. And I also saw the great creativity that I love about law enforcement. You know, the thing about a law enforcement officer is you give 100 cops a problem to solve, and you'll have 100 different ways of solving the problem, and the problem will be solved 100 different ways, and every way is just as good as every other way. That's how we work.
Right.
We're problem solvers. And so in my travels, I've seen everything up from a Olympic quality gym inside a law enforcement agency. I've seen that in my most recent travels in a suburb outside Atlanta, Georgia. I saw a Connex box outside on the driving track. That was their CrossFit gym. And they would open up the Connex box, they'd bring out their gear, they'd put it out onto the driving track while the track was closed for driving. They'd do their workout, they'd put the gear back in the Connex box, wave the flag, and they'd go back to driving. So I've seen it all. And what I've learned is that, to use the phrase I know all the listeners have heard, if there's a will, there is a way.
There's a way.
And it starts with the will, it starts with the heart set. If we have the heart for the mission, we will find a way to accomplish the mission.
How supportive were administrators to making this happen, having you come out and provide the training?
Well, I'll tell you what, when administrators hear that there is something free that will benefit their officers, it makes it a very easy yes. Let's learn more about this. Um,
Right.
and oftentimes, what I needed to do is I needed to come in and conduct guerrilla warfare, because over the years, CrossFit has evolved into a sport.
Right.
And so currently, if agency administrator were to look into CrossFit, likely the algorithm of the AI platform they were using to conduct their research would direct them into the sport of CrossFit. And that's not what I would advocate for law enforcement. So 20 years ago, or that might be a little bit too deep. I think I started teaching the application course approximately 15 years ago. So 15 years ago, that wasn't as likely to occur. And so I could come in teaching CrossFit because no one really knew what it was. But over time, there were some agencies that, because of the political environment surrounding CrossFit, on any given year, that environment was not going to be suitable for me to go in and focus on CrossFit for law enforcement.
Okay.
So in those instances, I would go in and I would teach constantly varied, high intensity functional movement for law enforcement. And guess what? Oh, come in, tell us more about that. The method stayed the same, but we just dropped the name CrossFit for a period of time. And I think at the end of the day, what matters most is that cops are doing constantly varied, high intensity functional movement. That's what matters most. That's what we need to be doing.
That's exactly what we need to be doing for the longevity of our career. Give the viewers an example of one of the workouts that was one of your go-to workouts.
Well, when I traveled for the CrossFit application course, I also wanted to emphasize that you could really start this on zero budget.
Yeah.
You did not need equipment. And so when I came to do the application courses, we never used equipment. We used PVC pipe to learn some of the basic weightlifting movements. And then we focused on the fundamentals, pull-ups, push-ups, and squats. And the workout we did as a team, because I also emphasize that law enforcement is a team sport. We
Right.
don't do this job alone. And so the workout involved teams of two, and teams of two did 4 rounds for time of run 400 meters, 30 burpees. But how the team accomplished that task was up to the individual team. So I would give the team a problem, and those team members would strategize to solve that problem as quickly as they could. And so it emphasized teamwork, but it also emphasized the fact that you don't need really anything other than your body to do a really phenomenal CrossFit workout that meets the criteria of variance, intensity, and functionality.
Now, the workout you described, I remember that one because I did it with you in Denver, and coming from San Diego, the altitude got me.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but that was a good
When I
workout.
invited you to that seminar, I knew it was my only chance of staying ahead of you.
Come
Juan,
on.
come out to Colorado. I'll be there a week ahead of you. Don't worry about it though.
Hey, Greg. Now, during your doctorate work, you did some work on resilience in law enforcement. Can you tell us a little bit about your findings, your research?
Yeah, it was such a blessing. I'm so thankful for the opportunity. It was at Regent University in Virginia Beach. And upon graduation, I was invited to join the faculty as a professor. So now I'm at
Wow.
Regent as a professor, teaching the very topics that I was studying. Really incredible opportunity. So thankful God opened that door for me. So my research was in the field specifically of resilience in law enforcement. And it was a 3-part study. There were 3 different components to this study. And I'll just give a brief synopsis because the context for the study is really important, especially for agencies that are trying to understand how to create a resilient culture. So the study started by looking at the top 50 SWAT operators on the National Tactical Officer Association PFQ, which is the test that you and I and some of our other colleagues designed. So we had access to the data from that test. So we knew who the top competitors were in the nation. So I sought out the top 50 scores, and those 50 represented people who not only maxed the test, but who got extra credit. And to max the test in and of itself, as you know, Juan, I mean, it is a feat of mental, physical, emotional, spiritual strength. It is a brutal test. And to get extra credit, you're just at a different level. And so I wanted to see how people at that elite level in law enforcement, who are also SWAT, and as you know, in law enforcement, when a cop needs help, I know it's kind of cliche because of the movie, but you call SWAT, right? And so these people are really the best of the best. And I wanted to understand how they develop and how they describe resilience. So that was part one. And then part two was, I think, kind of interesting. It was a type of method called snowball sampling. And in this study, I handpicked 5 people in my network who I recognized as being resilient cops. They met my definition of what a resilient cop looks like, how they think, how they behave. And I sent them a survey. And after they completed the survey, they were asked to send it to one or more fellow cops they also perceive as resilient. And one of the questions asked that individual officer to rate on a scale of 1 to 5 their own level of resilience. And among the really interesting variables I found is that there's a direct correlation between people that self-identify as resilient and the likelihood that another officer also perceives them as being resilient. So one
Interesting.
of the things we know about resilience is it's tangible. I mean, it's something that we can see, we recognize it in other people, and that's crucial because that also means that resilience is vicarious in nature. So a resilient instructor, their presence with other recruits helps to develop their resilience. We model the behavior we want others to see. So that was really how the study unfolded. And then there was also embedded in that study, there was kind of a in research, sometimes we'll do studies where we're trying to identify independent variables that would help us understand how resilience works. So that was another component of the study. But the the piece that I would really want to share with you and the listeners is the second and third part. And
Yeah.
that was where I'm looking at the top 50 SWAT officers and then this snowball sampling survey that went all around the nation. And what I found is that when I looked at the results from those surveys and from the data, there was no difference between the SWAT operators and these people who were randomly brought into the study. Because after I released the study into the wild, so to speak, I lost control over it. It was
Right.
just handed off from one officer to another. So it's much more random. We don't know who we're going to attract into that survey population. But there was really no statistical difference between the results that we saw. So that's also interesting because what that means for an agency is that when we offer resilience training programs and when we are desirous of instilling a resilience culture and a resilience environment, when we have the discussion regarding resilience, we don't need to tailor that for specific demographics. It doesn't matter what your assignment is, what your gender, what your age, what your education, what your time on the job. It really makes no difference. Resilience in law enforcement is just, it kind of stands on its own as an inherent quality we can see, we can measure, and most important, we can develop. So it's something that you're kind of not born with. It's something that needs to be cultivated and developed. And what's really remarkable about this, it kind of brings us back to CrossFit, is that what resilience takes is some form of adversity,
Oh, yeah.
right? Some form of adversity. And that adversity could very well be the workout.
Absolutely.
And what's amazing about this is the results. It tended to show that there are multiple pathways to achieving resilience, but fitness, physical fitness, is kind of a super pathway.
Mm.
And if we're doing a physical fitness workout as our resilience pathway, think about this, a resilience pathway that is primarily physical, a CrossFit workout, but it could be any type of workout, a workout that's high intensity involving functionality and variance. In that workout, will there come a point where you want to quit?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Me too.
Yeah.
Every time I do a CrossFit workout, I want to quit. And so what do I do? Well, I have to now rely on my mental faculty. I have to draw upon my innate willpower. So now I start to have a conversation with myself. And some of that dialogue is internal, it's mental. So I'm utilizing a physical pathway. I'm doing the physical workout, but simultaneously, I'm developing my mind. And also, I'm developing my emotions. Sometimes before a workout, my emotions are low. I might feel some anxiety or some uneasiness or some maybe even depression. But after the workout, isn't it amazing how much better I feel? And sometimes things that will worry me or bother me after the workout, I have no recollection of what they were.
None.
And we also found that for some people, a physical workout can even be a spiritual experience, a spiritual practice. And I recognize that in my own life. For me, I pray before the workout, I pray during the workout, I pray after the workout. So for me, it's just as much a spiritual practice as a physical practice. So that was one of the really encouraging outcomes of the study is that for agencies that are looking to create resilience culture, one of the most tangible, practical ways to do that is design opportunities for officers to participate in physical training because the physical training is training a lot more than just the physical pathway. There's a lot more going on between the ears and in the heart than we may realize.
I love that. I love that because I love fitness, as you know. And, there's so many different pathways when we're talking about fitness. And so, in listening to you speak, Greg, I'm wondering, hey, if you had your own department with a budget that had no bottom,
Yeah.
what does training, physical training, and defensive tactics training look like at Greg's PD?
Well, it looks a lot like what I was doing at the CrossFit gym I owned in Santa Cruz before relocating to Georgia. You just have to create a an environment, a physical place, a place, because this is also something that is sometimes overlooked. In law enforcement, we have historically, as a profession, we've prided ourselves on the importance of a place. So think about a roll call room. A roll call room, that's a sacred place in law enforcement. And someone outside the culture of law enforcement has no idea the sacred ground of a roll call room.
Right.
And someone outside the culture of law enforcement has no idea what happens when two patrol units pull up alongside each other and two law enforcement officers start to meet around the trunk of the car. That's sacred ground. And that ground or that territory or that place or that environment, that's very important. And one of the things that the gym does, especially if the gym is inside the agency, is it creates a special environment, a place where officers know they can go for the purpose of developing strength. And that strength, I use the word strength very broadly, very inclusively. So I'm referring to mental, emotional, physical, spiritual. And the gym in an agency, it can be that place where all of that can happen.
100%.
Right. And so once the place is established, then what begins to happen is officers start to take a lot of pride in that place. They like spending time in that place. Then from that place, the variety of different training modalities can begin to find their home. So now we can have mat space for jiu-jitsu or boxing. Now you can have the apparatus for doing the functional type movements. That's also where you can create the relationships that support peer support networks. That's also where chaplains can go to associate with the officers. That sets you up for spiritual care. That's where leaders in the agency can go to model leadership by example, leading from the front within their agency. It can all happen where? In that place. But if you are trying to create a culture of wellness and resilience and fitness, but you don't have a place where it actually happens, it becomes more theoretical.
Yeah.
But if you have the place where it can actually happen, now it's practical, now it's real, now it's tangible, and it can become a really magical place. Really, it takes on a life of its own.
I love that. I love that. That's what needs to happen. That's what needs to happen. Now, Greg, as I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about everything you're telling our viewers, and I'm thinking, what about those cops that don't want to go? How do we get them to go on a ride along to our place of worship, the gym?
Great question, my friend. Well, I think, for someone that hasn't been blessed like you and I with, well, I don't want to speak for you, my friend. So I was raised by parents that from a very young age, they modeled for me wellness. My dad was a chiropractor and a minister. My mom was a Peace Corps volunteer. So from a very young age, I was just modeled by my parents. I saw fitness and wellness and spirituality. It's all I ever knew. So for me, it's perhaps easier because that is my, to use a cop term, that's my standard operating procedure. That's my SOP. But for
Right.
someone that has not experienced that, now all of a sudden we're trying to encourage them, hey, come with me, participate in this, but they've never done it before. It can be a bit daunting. And so something that could be helpful is just this idea that something is better than nothing, right? So if an officer who has not participated in fitness for a really long time, for years, they're thinking, where do I start? Just go for a walk.
Right.
Just go for a walk. Just get outside and walk. It can start there. Is that functional? Yes. Right. So we start there. We just start with functional movement. And then maybe over time, we add some elevation to that. So we change the variety. And
Right.
then maybe over time, we start to add some speed. We'll pick up the pace. So we add some intensity. But we just start with a walk. We just start there. And it would be the same thing with every other method of wellness and resilience we want to introduce. So we could have that same conversation regarding spirituality. We could ask a colleague who we kind of sense is drifting away from moral value or ethic. We could ask that person, hey, when you think back about your career, what got you into this job? Do you
Yeah.
find do you find purpose in this? And that kind of opens up a conversation about things that are going to inherently be more in the spiritual domain, right? As soon as we start talking about purpose or meaning or value or morality or ethics, we're already in spiritual theological territory, right? And then
Absolutely.
you can follow that same pattern in every other area of well-being. You could ask somebody, hey, what are you doing for lunch today? You want to go out to lunch with me? I want to take you to this great restaurant. It's called My Kitchen. Bring someone over for lunch and show them how to make a food preparation meal, how easy it can be. It just starts with those simple things. We don't want to overwhelm somebody. Just one step at a time can create radical change if we just keep that momentum up.
That's, I think that gradual movement towards functional movements is key.
Right. Right.
Now, what about like in the academy? What we're getting these days is we get a lot of people that may not be mentally ready, and they think, well, you know what? I'm not in shape, but the academy will get me in shape.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the wrong approach, because you get there and now you may get injured because you're doing too much too quickly, or you are not just, you're just not physically prepared. So I'm thinking, for those that just arrived to the academy, what do you suggest, Greg?
Well, I mean, we could even reverse engineer that further. That could be something that agencies consider at the hiring process.
Sure.
There could be a recruit assessment physical battery test that's given with a minimum standard required before acceptance into the academy. So we could back up that progression further and further along the line. That said, the idea that I will get in shape when I participate in the academy, that's also prevalent ideology in the military.
Sure.
Remember when I went to boot camp, many of the soldiers in boot camp communicated to me that they wanted to get in shape, so they joined the army. Whereas I got in shape, best shape of my life, so that when I joined the army, boot camp would be easy.
Right.
Right. So just
Exactly.
different mindset. And that might be another research study that we consider doing is how to understand and measure that mindset and the difference over time of how that mindset shapes someone's trajectory in law enforcement.
Well, this whole topic really interests me, and I was looking at different departments throughout the nation. I found one in Washington State that actually hires people 4 weeks before they start the academy, and now they have them for 40 hours a week, and they put them through various different trainings, including physical fitness and defensive tactics training. And apparently they're having pretty good success with that model.
That is outstanding. I've seen agencies adopt a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu program where participation in the program earns them a blue belt.
Yeah.
So I think the more the agency can do to embed or require or facilitate or reward some measure of fitness or defensive tactics proficiency and capacity, the more the better.
I agree. What I would love to see is that the state somehow raises the minimum standards and starts funding police training a little bit better than what we do currently.
That would be awesome.
That would be. Greg, I want to thank you for joining me today because, like always, you provide so much insight with all your experience, and we could just keep talking. But I want to allow you to give some last thoughts, please.
Oh, I appreciate that, my friend. Well, what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you as a chaplain in law enforcement, let me just pray for all the listeners right now.
Please.
I think that's a fitting way to end. So, Lord, thank you for my dear friend Juan, and thank you for this opportunity that we've had to record a message that we want to positively impact the law enforcement culture. God, I just pray a hedge of protection around all my brothers and sisters in law enforcement that listen to the words of this podcast. I pray that your spirit would be with them to protect them, to equip them to fight the forces of evil, and to bring forth the light into the dark places in our nation. Amen.
Amen. Greg, thank you so much.
You're welcome, my brother. I love you, my man.
How do people find out more about you, Greg? Where do they go?
Oh, they can go to Georgia.
What if they're not in Georgia?
They're not in Georgia. They can go to Instagram.
All right. On Instagram. Greg, you're the best, man. I appreciate you. And for the viewers, please give Greg a follow. He's always doing something. And there's more shows to come. Thank you for watching.
Awesome. Right on, my friend. Thank you.
All right, Greg.